Peter, welcome in this interview.
Thank you.
Maybe you can explain a little bit who is Peter Hinssen?
Sure. My name is Peter Hinssen. I'm an entrepreneur. I did startups for almost 20 years. I'm a technologist at heart, and about 8 years ago I decided to spend more time on telling the story about technology. I started teaching at MIT in Boston and London Business School, and I wrote a few books on how technology is changing the world.
Yeah, and you are very excited to come to speak as a keynote speaker at the Asset Performance Award Night. So can you explain a little bit where comes your interest in our industry from?
It's a little bit personal because my father worked in the oil and gas industry his entire life, and specifically on maintenance and everything that deals with process control. So when I was a kid, it was all I heard from my dad coming home. And I think the evolution that you see in this industry is fascinating. New technologies are changing, in my opinion, tremendously what dealing with assets, managing performance, and thinking about prediction is going to change tremendously. So I'm very excited to be part of this.
Yeah. Can you give some examples of technologies that will impact our world?
Big data. I mean, this is an industry that's always been interested in information, but now big data is becoming abundant. We have technologies to deal with that. We have machine learning, we have artificial intelligence, we have all these mechanisms of connectivity. And I think if you put it all together, it's piling up technology after technology that is fundamentally changing how we think about how to deal with data. And I think it will have a tremendous impact on this industry.
Yeah. So in your book, The Day After Tomorrow, you're talking about what is going wrong in companies today. So they're missing some challenges, or they are not tackling in the right way the challenges. What is your vision there?
Well, I have a very simple idea of how much time do companies spend on today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. And then most companies are very busy with today. And when they look at the future, they often extrapolate today. They think that tomorrow is approximately the same. But we're now facing so many different changes that there might be changes in business models or changes in technologies or new players coming onto the market that we have to think about this disruptive, this day after tomorrow. And how do you deal with that? And when I talk about today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, many people say, oh, 70, 20, 10. The reality is we spend 93% of our time in today, maybe 7% thinking about tomorrow, and virtually none in the day after tomorrow. And I think in many industries, this was okay in the 20th century, but we're now fully in the 21st century, and that doesn't work anymore. We have to be much more flexible and agile, and that's why the day after tomorrow is more important than ever before.
Yeah. In your book, you talk about two interesting concepts: staying essential and staying
relevant.
Relevant, yes. So, what is the difference, and how can you work on that?
Well, I find it really interesting is that, of course, you want to be essential. You want to do something that makes sense. If you do predictive maintenance, that is essential. If you work for customers, you're hoping that you are vital for that customer. But the other question is, how relevant are you? And I think there's a very clear difference between essential and relevant. And I take an example in the telecoms industry. If you look at telecoms, 10 years ago, a telecom operator was essential. You need a SIM card, and they were relevant. They gave you added value. Today, in this world, they're still essential. You still need that SIM card, but their relevance has dropped. And therefore, if whatever capacity you have in an organization, whatever position you have in dealing with the outside world, that is the core question. Are you essential? I hope you are. But how can you make sure that your relevance doesn't go down, but your relevance actually goes up?
Yeah, and that brings us to the quality department, the maintenance department. So in fact, they don't add value directly to the product. The customer doesn't pay for the maintenance that was necessary in the equipment to produce something. But on the other hand, they are essential. And so what would be your tip in staying also relevant?
Well, I think we're in an age where everything is interconnected. So if you look at an organization, it's not silos anymore. I mean, we're in this network age. Everything is connected to everything. Every function is connected to everything. So when you say that your customer doesn't pay for it directly, that's true, but your customer will feel your customer will see and your customer will actually understand whether this is something which is integral in terms of, say, quality thinking or performance management. And in the end, if your company wants to be flexible and fast and agile, you have to incorporate that into every part of the organization. So in the old days, we would have silos, but now it's part of a network. And going back to essential and relevant, every fiber, every node, every element has to understand that you're part of a bigger picture and has to keep reinventing itself to be both essential and relevant for the outside world.
Yeah. So on the other hand, in our industry, you have also quite a lot of service providers, companies that perform maintenance activities, maintenance services. So how is this new world for them? How do they need to evolve?
We're more and more in this age of networks thinking about ecosystems. The role that they play is different. We're beginning to see that the old I supply a product and that's it is over. It's more and more as a service type of activities. And what you see is instead of the traditional boundaries, we get fluidity. We have more and more of that network and ecosystem type thinking. And that means that you're going to have new players entering the market very, very quickly. You're going to have traditional players who have to reinvent themselves. And you have different types of partnerships and agreements that we need to figure out. And I think figuring out what your role is as an external provider in this sea of fluidity in a connected world is going to be very fascinating.
Yeah. So this connectivity is entering in a lot of factories.
Yes.
A lot of them are experimenting with pilots, etc. But we see that there is some reluctance in order to scale this up. It's not that easy. So what are the barriers there and how can you solve that?
Well, I think we're in a phase where a lot of the technology is emerging. Take something like AI or machine learning that's relatively new. Most people don't understand it very well. There is a huge skill gap that we need to fill because we need to train and prepare people for that. But a lot of things are just trying out. They're experimenting. They're figuring out how to apply this. But it's very early game. If you compare that to the PC industry, this was the time where we had Commodores and Ataris, and not the established industry like we have it today. We're going through that phase. And if you're too early, you're going to burn a lot of money and not get a lot of results. But if you wait too long, you probably run the risk of becoming completely obsolete. I think it's making sure that you're constantly in tune, that you're constantly alert, that you follow this as closely as possible and make the right move at the right time. But you can only do that if you are prepared.
Yeah. So you're coming to talk at the Asset Performance Conference. So why should people attend your keynote?
Well, I'm very excited to be part of this. I think this is one of the most fascinating industries that for a long time has already worked with data, but is now making a quantum leap. I'd love to talk about how I see that evolving. I hope to inspire you to maybe even do more than what you're doing today, but above all to prepare ourselves for, I think, a very disruptive wave that is going to affect everyone. And I think if we understand this, we can all actually come out even better as a result.
Okay, thank you very much. We look forward for your keynote.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.